A few thoughts today around the
John in the cat.
sermon title,
He's watching
Treadmill.
service in Chicago, the Catholic Church parking lot.
I was asking our pre-service gathering whether we should get on the treadmill. And I'm not quite sure. I said I think we should get off it. Let's see where we end up after enduring my meager thoughts for the Sunday. This Sunday, as I've said in the announcements, is a milestone Sunday in the sense that we will be having our first lemonade on the lawn. Now, that feels like progress, perhaps just because it's something different from the regular Sunday activities. Something new and an in-person gathering. Naturally, with the normal way of being together as we have grown accustomed to, dressed properly with a mask and also distance appropriately. That is perhaps a good way to facilitate our need for in-person community and the way that we have to live for the sake of our own safety and especially those of others around us, particularly those that are more vulnerable, the more vulnerable in our community and in our society. Your church council and especially the board of deacons are constantly assessing and evaluating, and with the input of the guidelines from the state, from our denomination, the UCC, United Church of Christ, our conference, the Southern New England Conference, from various experts in the medical field and specifically public health. We are trying to weigh all this and find a way of being in the world where we tend to basic human needs for community while balancing it with safety and just plain common sense. I cannot get away from the feeling in my own life, and that is confirmed that it's been confirmed to me in many conversations with other people that they experience the same, that it feels as if time has been suspended, that it's difficult to determine or to remember what day it is, especially if you do not go to your office, which is still the situation for most people. And if you don't have a specific routine that is tied to specific days. I had the feeling this past week in particular that I think it is time for me to do an assessment of where I find myself, and especially in my thinking around the pandemic. It's been at least 6 months now since the pandemic really started to emerge as something that is newsworthy, something to take note of in the USA. And I started to look for literature that can help me in that assessment of where we are. I found an interesting article in that vein in The Atlantic recently. And I want to read to you the 4 major observations that a group of journalists made around the pandemic in the US. The first one is America is still failing its nursing homes. They say more than 40% of all US deaths have been in long-term care facilities. And the one journalist, Olga Kazan, reports additional COVID-19 deaths in nursing homes are probable, and they will have been preventable. The second observation about the COVID pandemic and US society that I found in this article is many pandemic experts are at risk of burning out. And what they added to that main point to explain what they mean is, and one journalist, Ed Yong, specifically wrote this, as the pandemic once again intensifies, so too does the frustration of the experts and their fatigue. And then the third interesting observation that they have is, they said, our minds aren't built for this kind of reopening, meaning that there is no general policy or protocol, but that it's a patchwork of states and counties and districts and municipalities and cities. They say individuals are being asked to decide for themselves what chances they should take. But a century of research on human cognition shows that people are bad at assessing risk in complex situations. This was stated by psychology professor Tess Wilkinson-Ryan. And then an interesting one, and that I think is a very good result, but funny in a way. The fourth major observation, one unintended consequence of lockdowns is that roadkill dropped dramatically. And then they say, this is the biggest conservation action that we've taken as a society, that is, possibly ever. Certainly since the national parks were formed, an expert said. Returning to my own assessment, within the framework of what I read and shared with you and other sources, I have a feeling of deja vu in my soul and in my mind, as if we have been on a treadmill as society. When I look at 135,000 deaths, probably by now, early this morning, it was 134, 600 and something, or 700 and something, with 3.2 million cases in the US, with 40 million jobs lost, and with so much suffering by so many, I almost want to say millions of people in so many ways. I'm wondering where we are as a society. I feel as if we've seen this before, as if we're almost back, if you take a national perspective, where we were at the end of February, the beginning of March. And I thought, let me check my own thoughts as well, because I have a need, as I think several other people, or most of us have, that you want to feel as if, or you feel that all the sacrifice, all the actions taken, everything we did collectively, as if that should have had some result. And I also wanted to see for myself, did I change in this process? And did I learn anything? And is there anything that I can find in my own thinking over this period of time that I can say, this is something that I can employ in my work in this beloved community and in society that may be of benefit? I'm not someone that keeps a blog or a diary or anything like that. I work mostly from memory, which is beginning to get dangerous sometimes, but I'm still persisting with that. So to gauge that in an objective manner, I went back to what I thought I wrote in our newsletters and in sermons. To see, this is a measure of what I thought then, and then try and assess where I find myself now. Now, in a sermon entitled Corona Lent, it feels like a century ago when we had Lent this year. The sermon I delivered on March 1st this year, a few points that I'll try to summarize. One point that I try to make is, as we enter into the pandemic taking hold in our nation, I try to say, let us be compassionate and tolerant with one another, because we respond differently to what we're experiencing and facing. I also try to say, let us resist the natural negative urge, so strong in modern society, to absolutize individualism and self-preservation. And let us lift up the value of the common good again. Third point I try to make, let us stay informed and be faithful servants of the truth. Wrong, misleading, or false information or lack of information creates fear, with all the negative consequences resulting from that. I also try to say, let us continue to take care of each other, to stay in community, and make sure that all of us are safe or able to receive care as it may be needed. Last point in that sermon, not the last one, but that what I want to quote here. Let us remember our huge responsibility towards the vulnerable, the members of our broader society that are homeless, those that do not have health care and are afraid to seek medical attention because they cannot afford it, and those that are urged to stay home but do not have sick leave and face financial ruin if they act in the interest of the common good. When lockdown measures started to kick in, I remember I tried to prepare our congregation not to succumb to the popular and perhaps the populist expectation that was taking hold, that we will do this quarantining and the lockdown and hunkering down for about 2 weeks, and then all will be fine. On March 19th in our newsletter, I wrote with a few words with a title, "In the Beginning." The main points that I try to make is I tried to make was we are in the beginning of the learning curve of what so many things practically mean. For instance, social distancing. We are in the beginning of discovering how fundamentally and radically we will be interrogated as individuals, families, and community about every aspect of our being. And in the third place, we are in the beginning of this pandemic in the USA, and we will be wise if we start thinking in terms of many months rather than a few weeks before anything resembling normalcy will return to our society and community. After that short detour or stock taking into my thoughts that I felt responsible to share with you in what feels like an eternity ago. Let's quickly look at the passages we listened to, the few verses from the Gospel according to Matthew, and also then followed by a few verses from the Gospel according to Luke. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus states that in his whole being and in his whole message, that he lived and that he taught. The essence of the law, of the commandments, the essence of all that is compassion, is to be kind, is to be gentle and humble of heart. Against the letter of the law, we juxtapose this and say, this is what it's really all about. This is the essence of God, the source of everything. This is what is at the heart of it and what should be at the heart of all religion. In the verses from Luke, from the Gospel of Luke, Jesus emphasizes that our relationship with God and the priority given, the highest value given to obedience to God and expressing the love of God is these commandments of love. The priority of the teachings, and also expressed in the life of Jesus, about God's realm, or as it is sometimes called, the kingdom of God, where things are done from and according to the love of God. Life-giving gentleness, selfless giving. Different from what we so often experience and see as part of modern and also postmodern life, where so often what we experience and encounter and what is presented to us as the ideal, that of a short-sighted, selfish, and destructive way of being in the world. Now again, the question, are we on a treadmill, not going anywhere, not getting anywhere in spite of exerting so much, or after so much exertion, so much effort, so much sacrifice. Is there anything that we can learn from what we went through to try and better equip us for entering into the future? Is there anything we can learn from this patchwork of opening and reopening and partial closing and, seemingly redoing the same stuff and making the same mistakes again? I want to suggest the repeat of something and staying on a treadmill in that sense of the basic truths underlying everything in our tradition and in all religions that have been able to exist and to bring a way of meaningful living to many people. I want to suggest that what Jesus taught, commandment of love, compassionate living, the compassionate way should guide our response to our universe and our reality, also the reality of the pandemic. And it should be a response guided by compassion after what the scientific truth of good science reveals to us. It seems to me there is no other way forward. There is no other way to live meaningfully, sustainably, and to avoid destruction and repeat of mistakes that kill so many people, that have done immeasurable harm to our economy, that has prolonged suffering, especially to the most vulnerable. Therefore, on this Sunday, where we will proceed with our lemonade on the lawn as a marker of perhaps, even if it is just psychological progress, let us again resolve, as we've said in the beginning of our statement of commitment to compassionate living, let us be unified in our love for truth. Let us heed the truth of good science, but let our response be one of God's people, walking humbly, loving mercy, doing justice, so that we may live, so that life in our homes and in our home planet Earth may flourish and may be able to sustain us and all life. Let us stick to that. Let us practice it diligently for the sake of life and for the sake of the one we say we follow, who paid with his life for the commitment to the teachings and the life that he lived as well. Let us be God's people, the beloved community, commitment to truth and compassionate living. May God's Spirit guide us in that way. Amen.